All right, let's get the legal perspective on this story and go live to Yifa Segal, a lawyer on the Israeli-American Council. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me. I am the chair of the International Legal Forum, the ILF.
Sorry, excuse me. Okay, let's begin. First of all, what exactly does this ruling mean, and what will this investigation be focusing on?
So this ruling means basically they had to decide whether the court, the ICC, has jurisdiction over this, what's called the situation in Palestine. So to have jurisdiction, it means that alleged crime needs to happen in the territory of a state that is a member of the treaty, of the Rome Treaty. And therefore, there is reason to believe that alleged crimes were committed and an investigation should be launched. And so this was a preliminary legal question. So in this context, the question is there a Palestinian state? Because it has to be a state in order to apply to those standards. And second, where is the territory of that state so that we can determine if the alleged crimes happen on that territory? So that was the decision in front of the court in this particular matter.
So assuming this investigation continues, if any government leaders, Israelis or Palestinians, are convicted, what can the ICC really do on the ground?
Well, it's a very good question. I mean, the ICC, with all due respect, I mean, it's been active for over a decade. It's only convicted mainly African leaders, many times where people did not comply. I mean, there were several cases where arrest warrants or even judgments were handed, and no one really respected them. And there was a very, very recent case of that. So, but we don't want to be that type of state. We don't want to be the type of state that needs to kind of, run away from the ICC or run away from different member states that might or may not decide to enforce arrest warrants. So I think, this decision for us, it's a very, very bad decision for Israel's position, I think, in the international community. Although, amazing things have happened. I mean, even states like Germany and Austria and Canada and Australia and Uganda and other states have stood up, against this decision of the ICC, basically stood up and argued in front of the court that it should not have jurisdiction, because this is not something that the court can assert jurisdiction over based on those two questions that I pointed out. So there's this weird situation where it seems like there's a vast objection to the premise of the court that it can investigate, that there is a Palestinian state, and even that there were war crimes to an extent that should be investigated by the court. And yet we still see a politically driven decision.
Okay, well, speaking of politics, the United States has said they're extremely concerned about this decision. I wonder if there's anything they can do to change it, and can Israel appeal this decision?
Well, Israel can technically appeal this decision. However, I mean, there was a strategic decision that was made, that was taken by the state of Israel, that we do not acknowledge the authority and the jurisdiction of the court over Israelis and over the state of Israel. So this was the reason that the state of Israel has chosen to not participate, and even until this very moment, in any of the proceedings, in any stages of the preliminary investigation. So I would assume, I think it's best safe to say that the state of Israel will continue to not recognize the jurisdiction and authority of the court, and will not participate, therefore will not appeal. And that means that there's no one else. I mean, the state of Palestine can potentially appeal, though, I think this is one of the greatest absurds, because you see, they name Israeli authorities, they name the IDF, and they name Hamas and other militant groups, but they do not name the PA, and they do not name Mahmoud Abbas, and they do not name any of those other officials that are responsible for murder and incitement. So there's a whole preposterous situation. And when it comes to the United States, look, the United States is more or less like in a similar circumstances. The Americans are also not members of the Rome Treaty. They did not concede to the authority of the courts, and yet they are under investigation for alleged war crimes in Afghanistan. Having said all that, I mean, the U.S. is not Israel. It's a stronger state. It has a lot more power in the international arena, and they have their own battles to fight now. Obviously, we've also seen a change in the way that the new administration is kind of dealing, less aggressively, let's say, with issues of the ICC. And I mean, I'm sure that they can pull weight and convince other states to support one thing or another, but not directly.
All right, well, we will have to wait and see how this develops. Yifa, Segal, thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for having me.